Hello everyone, Citrus here. Welcome back to our steampunk game Open Development Time. Today we are going to be giving the gun goblin his Second Amendment rights and allowing him to actually shoot bullets out of at least his basic gun. So to kind of catch you up to speed here, I do realize now that I will actually need to have Steam open real quick so that I can use their multiplayer hosting. And now you can kind of see, it's very, very quick, but we have a little pistol now, and that pistol is going to be his basic attack. We kind of did the abilities the last time I was doing this open development, but now we have our basic attack, and we're going to make sure that can actually shoot a bullet and actually deal damage to enemies. And I say that with quotation marks around it, because for the time being, it will probably just be a dummy that can take damage, and that will be its only function for the time being. So the first thing we're going to need is we're going to need some kind of like bullet prefab that we can use to shoot out of the gun and deal damage to enemies. So I'm just going to create something in the scene for now. Probably just be, I'm thinking kind of like in my head, I'm imagining this like sort of Terraria's gun system, and they have like those very thin yellow sort of rectangles to kind of represent the bullet flying through the air. I haven't played the Ranger class too much, so if I am completely misremembering this, I do apologize to all the Ranger players out there. But I don't know. Let's quickly go into our scene here and just see how that fares in like relative size to the player. Okay, that's decent. We'll work with that for now. And the next step to this is going to be making sure it has a collider on it so we can detect collisions with the enemies. So it'll be a box collider 2D, and we will set the is trigger to true because we don't want this to actually like have physics collisions. It's just going to hit the enemy. The trigger will allow it to deal damage to that enemy once we add some functionality to that, and then once that happens, like it'll disappear. And it won't sort of like push the enemy in any way. It'll just deal damage, go bye-bye, no other interaction with the world space. So we will also want to name this bullet. And I imagine we would either probably want a tag or a layer for the bullets, just to classify it in scripts and such. I like to use tags. I'm pretty impartial to that. I think layers, yeah, you know what, in hindsight, that was a poor decision. We will add a layer, and I'm once again having the wonderful issue where the inspector just disappears for a second. So we will have a bullet layer, and the reason we want to do this over a tag, tags are a nice and easy thing to check, and you're not like, I don't think you're limited, which you might be with layers. I'm not sure we can add more than 31. There's rendering layers. I think that's different though. But yeah, so with the layers, you can actually sort of, if you go into like the project settings, there's a collision matrix where you can kind of say like, okay, the bullet is going to interact with like, I don't know, if we had an enemy layer, that would be good. And then we could have a check mark there, but we would say like maybe uncheck the player so it doesn't interact with the player. And I think the way we write the code will make it so that like it will only interact with the enemies. It's going to like do a check when it has the on trigger enter event happen, and it'll check if it's finding an enemy, and if it finds an enemy, then it will perform its functionality. And if it hits other things, it'll just disappear. But we might want it to like miss the players, for example. In fact, that's probably a good idea. So yeah, we'll go ahead and do that now. We'll make sure this does not interact with the players because we wouldn't want players getting in the way of each other and blocking the bullets from being able to hit enemies just because you hit a player instead. And even if that didn't damage the player, it would still be frustrating just because, like, yeah, you'd be blocked from hitting enemies perhaps if a player got in the way. So that's why the layers is important, because then you can avoid collisions with certain things like players. So we have our bullet, it's got a name, it's on the proper layer, it's got a box collider 2D, and we will also want to give it a script for its functionality. So we'll go over here to our scripts folder, and we will go ahead and make a bullet script. Now, interestingly enough, one of the first things I sort of learned in game development here at Dakota State University was actually how to do sort of a bullet gun system. It was in 3D, mind you, so it's a little bit different, but the concept is pretty much the same. It's what I'm going to try to do here. And basically what we did was we had a list of unactivated bullets. And the purpose behind that was because, like, you know, you might think the best way to do this is to like spawn new bullets every time that the player shoots, and that can be a way of doing it. It certainly is a method of all time, but it can get expensive. And what I mean by that is, in terms of performance, instantiating and deleting objects can be a very expensive function to perform. It can take a toll on how well the game is running. And so if you just have a bunch of them at the start that are like unactivated and you're able to just have those there, you didn't instantiate them and you activate them rather than spawning them, that's a good way to go about things. And then once they hit their target or hit something and get deactivated, rather than destroying them, you could set them to inactive, and you could also like reset them or recycle them in some way. So my plan is basically we will have this bullet script is going to have an activate function, so that will turn on the bullet essentially, and it will fly forward. It will unparent itself from the player so that it's able to move independently, and then once it actually hits something, it's going to deactivate. And what we'll do is we'll have a reference back to the player. And using that reference, once it gets deactivated, we'll reset its transform so that it is back in the gun, so to speak, and then we will be able to recycle bullets rather than instantiating and destroying them, which should hopefully be better for game optimization. So we will just make this a private transform, and we'll call it player transform. Then, yep, the GitHub Copilot is recommending some other things, such as like the bullet speed, for example. Those will definitely be some things we'll need. Float speed, that's good. 20 might be a lot, but that's why we add the serialized field here, so we can change it in the inspector instead of having to go back into code. So when we activate, what we're gonna do here, trying to think, because yeah, like if the game object itself is turned off, then the script that is on the game object will not be able to run its functions. So yeah, the activate will need to, well, we'll have the renderer turned off, so the visual won't be active, even though the bullet is. Oh, probably the collider too. So we'll take the collider, the visual, those will be off to start. We'll turn those on when it activates. We'll start it moving in a direction, which will be forward. And we'll have to make sure that forward is always the direction that the player is facing. And so maybe we can use this player transform reference to set the direction that we're going to be moving in. Yeah, lots to consider here. I had sort of a general game plan going into this, but details, I'm getting a little stumped here. So we'll need our sprite renderer. We're just going to call this visual. Serialized field. We will have a box collider 2D. We'll just call this collider. No need to get terribly specific there. But it's gonna yell at me because I think collider is also sort of just like a term that is used in code to reference a variety of things. So we'll call it bullet collider to be a little more specific here. Craving something sweet, so I'm gonna have a Jolly Rancher lollipop. Get the brain cells going, sugar rush. So we will enable the visual, enable the collider. And then we want to get like a reference to what forward is. We can get that from the player. And I think the way we want to move this is like transform.translate. There's a couple ways to like move things through world space. It is always tricky deciding what to do because like they will have different ways they'll interact with physics and such. I'm not well attuned to all of the nuance behind it. So really crossing my fingers here that I am able to make the right choices. So we got our activate. Then I think I'm going to make a vector 2 firing direction is what we'll call it. And Copilot is saying to use something based on the local scale of the player, which is interesting. I wonder if even for 2D you still use vector 3s for like movement transforms, because I mean, you know, if we were to go and actually click on our bullet in the hierarchy here, we do still have a transform with X, Y, and Z components. And of course, we're only using X and Y because we're in 2D, but the Z still exists. So I think we might still need to have it worked into our programming perhaps. So I'll make this a vector 3 equals, and we'll say player transform dot forward. And now we have our reference from player transform. And I think for the movement of the bullet, we will probably want to use a coroutine, just because, yeah, update is something I like. I don't think it makes a ton of optimization difference, but I think if you're using coroutines instead of update where you can, like if you do not need to be checking every single frame for a certain functionality to happen, then the coroutines can give you a slight edge in optimization. So have an IE numerator. We'll just call this like bullet movement or something. That seems specific enough. And we want this movement to be fairly quick, so we're gonna wait for end of frame, and that's how often we'll be updating this. And so transform transform.position and adding on, so what Copilot wants to do is transform.forward times speed times time.delta time. And I think we want to do all of that, except we're going to replace the transform.forward with the player transform.forward so that, regardless of on the firing direction it got when it was activated. But I think the plus equal mode of moving this object around should work for our purposes. So we'll do, so firing direction cannot be referenced down here because I declared it within the activate function, so it only exists within the context of the activate function. So we're gonna copy that and paste it up here. We'll make it private. And we don't need to initialize it because it will get its value in activate. And now we can reference firing direction and use it in our bullet movement. And then obviously we'll want to start this bullet movement and activate. All right, so I think now would be a good time to go ahead and maybe start testing this just to see if we can get firing to work. We'll put that visual there, collider there, deactivate those two things because we don't want them active by default. And then I will go over to our prefabs folder and finally drop this bullet in our prefabs folder. Now the next thing to do is go to our player, which is only the gun goblin for now, and we are going to give him a couple of bullets. And so we'll make sure that player transform is correct. And you can kind of see the like the sort of grayed out outline of our bullet here. And we want this to be like firing roughly from the position of the gun. And I think the way we might want to do that, we currently don't have a way for it to sort of to flip around, because right now the way the player flips is not by flipping its own transform, it's just flipping the visual. So if I were to like move it, say here, that would cause issues when the arm is over here. So I think what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try and just get it like dead center, which means X will be 0. And yeah, then the Y can be something like right about there. And I don't know how the rendering is going to work in terms of like if it's going to appear over the player or under. My hope is under, and then it'll move out from under the player, and that will kind of make it look like a normal shooting, quote unquote, animation. Yeah, so I think that about does it for the setup for now, just to get these bullets firing. So I will make a couple of them. Oh, hit my pop filter there. Go click on this. And now we got like 5 bullets. We'll say that's a good number for now. I think, you know what? Why not? Let's go to 10. I think that's a good number, because I don't think the player will reasonably have more than 10 bullets from its basic attack on the screen at a time. So as these start to hit things and then reset, they'll go back to the player, and the player will be able to fire those bullets again. So we should only need a small handful. And now we have to go into the actual abilities script for the gun goblin man, and we're going to set some more functionality up in here. So there's a couple ways we could do this. Basically, we need some sort of data structure, I think would be the good term here, to store all of these bullets. The way my teacher originally taught it was with a linked list, I believe. But I am not the most well-versed in linked lists. I know that they kind of go in a very linear order. Like it'll go from one entry in the list to the next. They have pointers to the next entry in the list. The trouble with that is when you get to the end, unless it's a circular linked list, it doesn't have a reference at the end to go back to the start. So recycling bullets will be tricky, I think, with a list. I don't know how circular linked lists would work in Unity at all. So I think just for simplicity's sake, for my understanding, an array will be the best option, which is a very, very, very basic primitive data structure. But indexing is a very nice thing. So I think I have to like do something weird with this. I have to like do like system.serializable or something for this array. Or like, I can't use serialize field. I think maybe I have to be like public. And we'll say, and we're making this an array of the script is what this array is going to be referencing, because then it will be calling just, if we shoot, it calls the activate function, and then the bullet will handle the sort of firing logic from there. So all we kind of need to do is, we've got our 2 coroutines on the basic attack here, one for disabling the abilities, as we should, just making sure that like during the animation, none of the other abilities are jumping in and overriding it. And then the pistol duration coroutine, because this isn't actually an animation, it's a sprite overlay of the pistol arm onto the sprite, and the pistol duration controls how long that is active for. So, once that gets started, then I think we can go ahead and figure out which bullet we're going to fire. Now, obviously the first time around, we'll just look at like the first entry in the array, and I kind of just need to figure out like, okay, how are we going to sort of proceed with like the recycling? And I think what we'll do is we'll get to the end of the array, and if we're at the end, then we will go ahead and go back to the beginning, back to the first entry in the array. And by that time, the first entry in the array should be reset and recycled in. There should be something there for the array to fire. And actually, like the array will never like lose its references to the bullets, so something will surely happen. I don't think we're not going to have like any null reference exception errors because nothing's getting destroyed or deleted. It's all just kind of getting deactivated. All right. So I think what I'm going to need to do is I think I'm going to have a private, and it'll be an int. Bullet index is one thing we could call. I'm going to call it bullet to fire. And it will start at 0 because arrays start at 0. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do pistol bullets. We're going to look at bullet to fire. And we're going to call its activate function. And then we're going to do what Copilot suggests and add 1 to the bullet to fire. So now the next time this runs, it'll be looking at the next index. The issue with that is once we get to the end, like this can't run infinitely. It has to restart. So I think what we need to do is we need to have, if, bullet to fire is greater than or equal to the length of the array minus 1. And the reason that's important is you don't actually want to be accessing the index that is the length of the array, because that is a terminating character, sort of. Since the array is indexed at 0, the last, like if you had an index of size, or an array of size 5, for example, and you tried to access entry number 5, that doesn't work because you only have entries actually in indexes 0 through 4. And that's 5 entries. It's the correct size and everything. But yeah, you can't actually access that last thing. So hence the minus 1. So I think this is correct, and we want to do that reset to 0. So we'll copy that. But I think we're going to add to the index anyway, and then if that addition exceeds what we want it to be, then we'll reset. And I think because of the way I'm setting that up, the equal to goes away. Because if it's equal to that length minus 1, that's the last bullet. So we do still want to fire that before we reset and go back to 0. All right, so now if, I believe I saved, yep. So go back into here, and we're gonna find out if I properly set up the array so that we can fill it in here. Yep, okay, so public worked, and we're going to have 10 entries, which means we have element 9. We go up to element 9 because there's also an element 0, so that's 10. And then I'm just gonna click and drag these real quick. Now I could save myself this trouble by setting a like get all components of type something. There's basically a function that would allow me to do exactly what I'm doing now, just at the start of the game. But you know, for every sort of function you call like that, you're using processing power, like even just a little. And so it's like, yeah, I can just do this little bit of extra work now, and that burden does not fall to the computer at runtime. So I always like to manually fill my fields when I can, just to sort of help out the computer, make it run a little bit better. So we have this array, we have it filled. The activate function should do some things. So hopefully this will now... Okay, interesting. So we have fired a bullet. It's not moving anywhere. Now that's a bit of an issue. One of the first things to note is that the bullets are children of the player. And so because they are children of the player, they will sort of follow the player around. And so I need to set the parent to nothing. And yep, we can see Copilot caught on pretty quick. We need to set the parent to null so that the bullet can move independently of the player. So that's one fix we need to do. And as you can see, the bullet appeared, and it appeared underneath the player just like I wanted, but it doesn't move anywhere, or at least it doesn't appear that it's moving anywhere. I can quickly go to the inspector here and look at our bullet in the hierarchy, and we can see that the transform.position does not appear to be moving at all. Now, why might this be? I have a couple of guesses. I don't think it particularly liked using the firing direction here. So I'm going to set this to transform.forward. And we're just going to see if this does anything. This will, I think, still lead to the issue where they're only going to shoot in one direction regardless of where the player is facing. But we might be able to reorient them before firing, if this still works. But it does not. It almost feels like the coroutine doesn't get called, but it does. So transform.position, I believe, should it should be the world, yeah, the world space position of the transform that this script is on. We're adding on to it with speed and time.delta time. They might not go anywhere if any of those values is 0. Oh, also this is still in our scene, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And now we will go to our prefabs, we'll go to the player, and we will check on these bullets. But the speed is 20, so it doesn't look like any of these things would be 0. But no harm in checking. Let's set up a debug log. And if that debug log comes up as 0, well, there's our problem. And what we see, perhaps more surprisingly than anything, is that that debug log is not appearing at all. Because I didn't save. Here I thought I figured it out and the coroutine wasn't getting called for some reason, but just forgot to save. Holy amateur hour. How are we doing on time here? 30 minutes. I was hoping we'd be a lot farther by now. Okay. Really can't believe I didn't catch this sooner. The coroutine doesn't loop at all. Surprise, surprise, I didn't put a loop in the coroutine, so the behavior in the coroutine is not looping in any way. So what we need is we will need a some sort of lifetime, some timer for the bullet for how long it's going to be active for, and then we need the coroutine to run for as long as that lifetime is, however long that's going to be. So I do believe this will work. Well, to my complete and utter shock, this is not working. I think we have some infinitely looping stuff here, though, because, oh no, elapsed time is getting increased. So eventually this will end. Yeah, I think if I get rid of that. Generally, when you're doing a while loop, I think you can just throw in a yield return null. You don't need to worry about how often it's running or something. Let's try that. I doubt it'll make a difference, and no, it does not. Let's throw our debug log back in here. We'll say that. I just want to see if a debug log is running, period. And we can see here that it runs. It runs quite a few times. And it's moving along the z-axis. The x-axis movement not going anywhere. Y-axis movement not going anywhere. Y-axis is good. We want that to stay the same. But the problem is that it is moving on the z-axis instead of the x-axis. And I think the reason it does that is because when you have a vector 3 and you're using like a transform.forward, for example, forward is the z-axis. It goes based off of the z-axis, and I think instead what I want is not dot forward, but dot like right, I think would be the x-axis. And then like up is the y-axis. So let's try that. And maybe now it'll go somewhere. And there we go. We now have a bullet shooting from this attack. The trouble being that there is no reset functionality for the bullet. So once we shoot our 10, that's it. Time's up. So we need to have a reset function for these bullets that sets it back to the player. We might need to get a reference to like the sort of the vertical offset to make sure that's correct, because we can't just it's not as simple as just making it a child of the player again, because it'll go to 0, 0, 0 for the position, and we had those slightly offset. They were like, yeah, they're like 0.16 off, so we'll need something for that. But then we turn off the visual, we turn off the collider, we parent it under the player again, we make sure its position is where it should be, and that, I believe, should allow it to be fired again. And then we have to do damage, and that's a whole nother beast in and of itself. We might wrap up the video for the night before I get into that, because I've got a feeling that will add quite a bit of time to this video. Sorry for that brief pause, just had to throw my lollipop wrapper away, and now we will get back to it. So back into our bullet function here, we will also have a, I believe this can be a private void restart. And then we also need to have like the on trigger enter events. Because we want it to it's either going to restart when just the lifetime runs out in this bullet movement script here, or we want it to restart if it hits something. And currently, I don't think there's really any way for that to happen. It could hit items in the scene right now, which I don't think we want that to happen. The items I don't think are going to like actually have a physical presence, so to speak, in the world. It's just something that the player is going to go over and collect. But there is no layer for the items as of yet, so I'm going to add an items layer. And for these 4 items here, go ahead and put them on that layer, and we'll go into our project settings once again, and we are going to make sure that the bullets do not interact with the items. We'll turn that off. Stuff like the ground, for example. And I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this. Duplicate's an interesting way of pronouncing that. We'll just have this sort of stand upright. And then we'll go ahead and just move it like over here. And now we have a wall for the player to hit with the bullets. And so that will deactivate it if the lifetime does not deactivate it. So we'll have a private void on trigger enter. And obviously if it hits something, we don't want the bullet movement to be happening anymore, so I think the first thing to do in restart will be stop. We can just say stop all coroutines for simplicity's sake. Don't need to get too specific here. And then, yeah, just as long as it enters anything, And I know in 3D, if you want to have on-trigger enter detections work, both things in the collision will need to have a collider. And then on top of that, you'll also need a rigid body on one of the things at least. So on the off chance that that is also true for 2D, I don't think it's an off chance. I think it's definitely going to be a thing. We'll grab our bullet prefab here, and we will add a rigid body 2D. And we don't want it to have gravity at all. So in 3D, there's like a uses gravity thing that you can just check off. I think for this, I would just set the gravity scale to like 0. And that should be good. But let's test this out. Ooh. Now the bullets are way up high. That's consistent. And now, oh, now they don't respond to the player direction at all. That's cool. So having having the rigid body 2D is a so there's different body types. I think this is probably what I need to change. And I think kinematic is what I need. And this, yeah, it takes away the gravity options. And I think this will like have a rigid body on the object for purposes of like collisions and such. Ooh, I guess I didn't check this last time when we went in. Oh, and it just now occurs to me, yeah, that like even though I can't grab the player transforms direction because that isn't changing. It's just the visual on the player that's changing. So, ooh, maybe what I want is also a reference to perhaps the sprite renderer for the player, so we can get direction. Yeah, that's so weird to me that like the flipping direction for the player is just a visual thing rather than an actual transform thing. That's gonna throw me off, I think, a lot during this project. So, nope, don't need the rigid body. Thanks for nothing, Copilot. We will get the sprite renderer. We'll call it player visual. And if player visual dot flip x, so if the x is flipped, then it will go to the other direction. It will go the opposite of right. It'll go left. And yeah, I think that looks good, but this is starting to look a little messy, so I'm going to separate the if-else. I'm kind of like an OCD sort of coder. I like everything to be like nice and spaced and stuff. I'm OCD in like weird ways, I should say. Ooh. Then I actually forgot to go into the player prefab and set that reference up for all these bullets. So we need the player sprite renderer, so that'll be that. And now the player can shoot both ways. Perfect. This is looking a bit like a laser gun right now, I think. So I'm actually going to go into the bullet prefab for one. And I'm going to shrink the scale a little bit. I'm going to turn the sprite renderer on here just so I can kind of see this play out. I think we need to, yeah, shrink the X down a little bit. My OCD says get rid of those extra digits. Maybe move this down to like a 4, 3. I think this could look thinner. I think that looks good. That looks a little bit better. So we're gonna do that, and we're also gonna increase the speed here. I want it to be like twice as fast. Bullets are quick. Bullets move very fast. So we'll go in here now, and ooh. That goes a lot quicker, and I think that feels a little bit more like an actual gun. So now, for now, I just want to test if like collisions are working. I'm going to fine tune some more things about the visuals. I think I've made the bullets too thin, or they're not positioned correctly. Something feels off. Bullet hit, and then we'll debug other.name. So we'll figure out just what it's hitting, what it's able to detect collisions with, and that'll be helpful for just how we go about tackling this. Ooh, we're getting the debug logs from the position still, which I don't need anymore. We're fine without that, because that'll just bury the collider debug log. How are we doing on time? 46 minutes, okay. I'm gonna try and make this very quick here. Pew, pew, pew. The gun is doing things, and it looks like it is not colliding with anything really. But yeah, you guys don't need to see me do all the visual fine-tuning and stuff. I think you get the point of what we're trying to do here and what's going on, and there are definitely some problems for me to work out with this system. This did not go quite as smoothly as I had imagined it all in my head, but I thank you for watching this video, sticking with the journey nonetheless, and I hope you'll stay tuned for more amazing content about this game and how we're developing it. It should be a good, fun, educational experience for us all. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Citrus out.